I would like to, good evening, I'd like to call the meeting of the Berlin-Boylston School Committee to order again. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded, so your image and or voice may be broadcast. We're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and the flag is right over there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we're going to start with public comments. I have two people signed up, and I think I have other people that would like to speak. So we'll start with the list first. Is Jessica here? I think her husband is coming. We'll give him a chance once he comes in. Katrina?
Is there a spot?
I don't know.
Yeah, where's the
Is
spot to stand?
that good?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
So hello, me again. I feel like I'm here a lot lately. My name's Katrina. I have a third grader at BES, and I'm here tonight to just say it's time. I think it's time to give parents the rights back and to give these kids the childhood they deserve. Oh, a sense of normalcy, an environment where they're not treated as potentially harmful to each other. Our children should never again carry the burden of protecting adults. They shouldn't feel afraid to attend school. They deserve to be free and to learn and to see each other's faces again and their teachers' faces. I was lucky enough to volunteer Monday at my daughter's third grade class, and some things I noticed in a very, very short time was the amount of time a child touches their mask. There were children who were pulling their mask forward, I've seen adults do this, to talk. There were kids whose noses weren't covered, and there were kids having trouble hearing people talk. Very normal, and there's nothing wrong with that for them. Heck, I couldn't hear any of them speak unless I got really close and tried really hard, and I don't think that's any way for a child to learn. It's especially upsetting that this is their school day, when on TV, just like we saw this past Sunday, there's people unmasked in large groups. You can go to a restaurant and eat, you can go to the mall, you can go here and there without masks, but we're teaching them that school is unsafe. And this isn't the message we should be sending. This committee has heard overwhelming evidence over the last month or so that has showed the inefficiency of masks, the side effects of wearing masks, and the mental health effects to our children. We never mandated masks for flu or any other respiratory virus, and there still had always been risks to some families, some more than others. Mental health is no different. I'm saying tonight that if there are any potential side effects to masking, it should be a parent's right to choose what's best for their child. Let's, as a community, come together for our kids. Stop putting the burden on them. What's best for one family isn't always best for another. It's been 2 years of sacrifice and fear for them, and it's time to do what's right for them. And I heard this quote, and I thought it was very important to read tonight. Nothing in life is to be feared, it's only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we can fear less. And I thank you for the opportunities to speak in front of you for this, and please let these kids see each other's faces. Thank you.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll go in order of people that want to speak. Hey there, are you Jessica's husband?
I am.
Would you like to speak now? You put us up first.
Sure.
Excellent, thank you.
No problem. Is there any specific place I should think?
Wherever you're comfortable.
Okay, and I apologize. I'm reading from an email, so I apologize
No
for
worries.
that. All right. We're glad that rates in Central Mass as of yesterday are low, so they're below 50 out of 100,000, which is the cutoff for indoor masking per the CDC. However, this is not true for Western Mass or many of the surrounding areas. It's good that last week our district showed 9 student cases and two staff cases, but they're not 0. If students are unmasked, there could still be spread in schools. The timing of the mask mandate is unfortunate with February vacation coming, many people traveling. We want to make sure that, people traveling, people on planes, people in places that have much higher rates, we still want to make sure we're being cognizant of that. The one thing that we want to make sure is if people are in areas, if they're getting close contacts, if people are traveling, if you're traveling out of state, we still want to make sure we have the ability to think through those cases and being able to handle those, and as the situation changes, being able to adjust. So we'd like to consider requesting people to mask, even if vaxxed, if they're close contacts. Unvaxxed and vaxxed close contacts should be masking just by nature. We also ask to listen to the survey and the data. On the survey, there's a lot of questions on there. It seems like the majority of parents think that the COVID protocols have kept their children in school. And so if our rates go above what they currently are, please have another vote to see if, based on the rates, based on the changes, if there's something that has changed that we want to reconsider. We'd like to just have the opportunity, have another vote, and see if it makes sense to rethink the masks in school. Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for coming. So I suppose what we'll do is we'll start with James, do you want to speak? You don't have to, I just didn't know if anybody wants to speak, I don't know if you want to raise your hand or how to do it.
Anyone here wants
Does anybody here want to speak? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth. I have a son in the Berlin Memorial Preschool Program. It's been phenomenal. They've done a great job managing COVID, so thank you for that. I think with Omicron, we've seen there's a fair number of breakthrough cases, even if you're vaccinated and boosted. And so I think one of the simplest ways to protect against that is still to wear masks. And so I'm in favor of continuing to wear masks. However, the community feels differently. I know of one school district that is considering requiring it for the pre-K programs because they're not able to be vaccinated, and so I offer that as an option for consideration.
Somebody else? Is that her full name for the record?
Your full name.
Elizabeth Brennan, I'm sorry. Elizabeth Brennan.
Thank you. And you're from Berlin, Boylston?
Boylston, my son's at Berlin Memorial.
Thank you. Before we close the public comment section, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. Does anyone have any communications on the board that they would like to share? So I guess we'll move on to our discussion. Is there a motion to accept JESI guidelines for the removal of the mask mandate?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I wanted to talk about the survey. So one thing that I saw in the survey was the one question I thought that was overwhelmingly was like 70%. 70% of the group said that they wanted. Do you believe the school district should define parameters for when to remove and/or reinstate masking and COVID safety regulations? And then there was a link to the CDC. 69.3% of the community said yes. So I guess my question is to Jeff, what were you guys getting at that question, and how can we follow through with that? Because out of all the questions, that was the only one that 70% was yes, that I would say a majority swung to yes, we want to do this.
Well, by saying you define the guidelines, then you can define when the mask comes off. So for example, one of the things that nurses have recommended, and you saw that,
Yes.
is that typically right after vacation, we see an increase in cases. And so what they suggested is removing the mask, but waiting a week. And so if you think about that, it makes sense because from their standpoint, and actually from a science standpoint, if you now introduce two variables into this equation. So if you take the mask off on the 28th, we know that we're going to see a spike, but because the masks are off and we historically see a spike after vacation, you don't know which one of those has fallen. So by introducing a timeline, by saying, and this is the person, by saying something like the mask will come off not on the 28th, but the next
was the 7th they recommended, I think, which was March 7th.
March 7th,
Yeah.
which would be the next week. So that would be this committee defining guidelines, an example of.
With the nurse's guidance.
Yeah, or any other way you choose to do it. That's.
So it would be
example.
something that the school committee would set in place. I mean, I think it's an interesting concept because, I guess I interpreted it to, general cases in the state. I mean, you can interpret that many ways. There's many ways you can do guidelines.
Yeah. Well, because now that it's left up to local control, you can define parameters you want to use. So that was just an example, because I had just read that.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm wondering, given Jeff just brought that up about the nurses, and I was thinking about that, does it make sense to wait a week?
So I actually question the statement that we've seen a spike in cases after school vacation weeks. I went back today after seeing that recommendation and looked at the cases both in the state of Massachusetts and in both Boylston and Enrollment in the weeks after both February vacation and April vacation in 2021. And in both cases, the number of cases went down the week after both vacations last year and continued to go down the week after that. So I'm not sure where the concept that we see more cases the week after vacation is coming from, because the data I'm finding from the Massachusetts Department of Health indicates otherwise.
Did you look at the school data or the state?
Didn't look at school data. I don't think we were tracking school data necessarily in 2021, but that's the data available. But in Berlin and Boylston, the week of February vacation last year, there were 31 cases. The following week, there were 20. The week after, there were 20.
We had an increase of cases when they came back from this vacation. I know that this year. I didn't go
That's
back.
Christmas vacation, I agree, 100%. In the middle of the Omicron surge, there were more cases in that, but that was entirely, in my opinion, due to the Omicron surge, not due to people just being on vacation. There were those cases where they were in school or on vacation.
I'm not arguing with them. I'm saying the nurses track the data, so they're using school data as opposed to whatever's happening in the community. And sometimes there is a lag. But, so, I mean, I know for a fact that it was increased in December because I looked at
I
it.
agree with that 100%.
So I don't know that except for what the nurses.
I mean, also last year in February, we were in a hybrid model, so only half the kids were coming back to school on Monday and Tuesday. School was closed Wednesday, and then everybody was, but April,
We were tracking cases.
April, we were down 60% the week after April vacation.
Right.
And then we were vacation.
which is different than February because cases in general were probably lower than they are right now.
Probably, I don't know what the numbers are.
Right, yeah. But it's hard to compare year over year, I think. And I agree with Adam as well, that it's hard to compare December break to this break because again, cases in general in the state. But I guess two questions I'm posing to the other members of the committee or other people here. One, should we, and I'm not saying it's something we have to do tonight, but moving forward, so it's not always this off the cuff, okay, what do we do now? Should we maybe define some black and white parameters? If, and again, I'm not saying we do it, maybe we work with the nurses or we have an expert, somebody, the Board of Health. I don't know how to go about doing this, but maybe we define, okay, when cases hit this amount, masks become strongly recommended. When cases hit this amount, masks become required. So it's not always, we have to do a vote because cases are through the roof and the nurses are freaking out. I don't know, I'm asking, does that make sense? It seems like that is what 70% of the community, according to the survey, is asking for.
I would just add that I love surveys, but we have to be careful with surveys too. Because 70% of the community, it's not, right? Whatever percentage it happens to be the number that's surveyed, is that right? Okay.
I mean, are we not planning to use this survey?
Well, I think the survey is important. I mean, it was pointed out that people could vote multiple times, which makes it not necessarily 100% reliable, but if the information is there, it is helpful. As far as the parameters go, I'm not sure how we would mark that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's something that any of us has the expertise to do. I think it would be something that the nurses would have to do. But I think moving forward, it might be helpful so that people in the community would know if cases start to go up, we're gonna have to require them, but if they stay down, and maybe it's in school spread, I don't know. I don't know what the parameters are. All I know is we sent the survey out, we had everyone do it before the meeting. I think we should at least discuss it before we take a vote. And I think I looked at this, and most people want masks on. I'll be honest, I voted yes. I don't want my kid to mask for the rest of the year. Do I think the day after break is the right day? No, I think maybe wait a week. And the nurses recommended that. I think that's a safe way to go. I know people are chomping at the bit. They want the kids out of the masks. If I could have a say, I'd say let's get the masks off for sports like this weekend. I don't know if we can even do that. Because I feel for those kids playing basketball in there. So I guess, I'm posing 3 questions. A, can we remove masks for the sports effective immediately? B, how do people feel about, 1 week, 7 days per the nurse's recommendations if it's just in the classroom? And C, do we think the committee should be responsible to define some parameters as far as when masking comes back and when masking doesn't come back, or are we just saying definitively masking is never coming back in this community?
Well, I think the answer to number 1 is actually, I think that lies in the hands of the MIAA. So that we can't even decide.
So even if we drop masks in schools, they might still have to wear them to the basketball games.
Yes, and during the press conference, if I remember correctly, they had hinted at the fact that the MIA was meeting and they would have some guidance that would be coming out soon. So that's something that it's not in our jurisdiction to tackle right now. How do members feel about waiting a week?
So I have an opinion on that. So the last few weeks, the few meetings we've had here, everybody said follow DC, don't go against the science, follow DC. DC has now looked at the science and decided that the 28th is the day. They've got the State Department of Health involved, panel of experts that they call their health experts. They say that's the day. I don't think we should not go against them 3 weeks ago and then go against them this week. I don't think we should do that. If they're saying the 28th is the day, I'd like to do it today as well. I'd like to do it for sports, but
Yeah, I didn't
28th
know.
is the day, the 28th is the day. Unfortunately, we can't go against DC or we get sued. So we learned the last few weeks. So-
Well, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to respond. Are you done?
Yep, I'm
Okay.
go ahead.
So, and again, I'm going by, so there was an email thread through MASC, and I understand that MASC is not DESE, but it was clarified that DESE is not actually giving any formal guidance on whether a community should mask or not. DESE is saying, we no longer have a mandate, you make the guidance, localities.
Mhm.
So technically, if we extend it by 1 week, we're not going against a DESE recommendation, we're gonna remove it. We're just doing it, I don't know that every district in the state has break on the same week. I don't know the answer to that, I don't know,
You go.
public schools.
So I'm just reading from the memorandum that we were given from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, I think. After consulting with medical experts and state health officials, the commissioner will not renew the state mask requirement after it expires on February 28, 2022. Effective Monday, February 28th, the DESE mask requirement will be lifted statewide. The Commonwealth's high vaccination rates and widespread availability of COVID-19 testing for school personnel and students support this decision. And I believe in the press release, they also mentioned that they had met with local boards of health and other people in the medical field. So I know this decision didn't come lightly. It involved the commissioner, it involved the governor, even the lieutenant governor spoke about it. So my feeling is that, as Mike pointed out, we've been told that we were supposed to follow what Jesse said, and you're right, it's giving it local control. We have very high vaccination rates in our schools, and they felt that the 28th was the date that it would be safe to remove the mask mandate. So that's just my feeling, and
No, and that's why I'm throwing it out there. I mean, I know we all have different opinions, and I think that's what makes us a great committee, so that we can all bring it out, and hopefully, we're each representing an aspect of the community. The other thing I was gonna say in response to what you just said, Laurie, was DESI is also strongly recommending individuals that are not vaccinated to be masked. So I think somebody spoke tonight about the preschool. I mean, the vaccination rate within the preschool is probably extremely low, if any. I know the elementary school is only at about 54%. I don't know if that rose in a week, probably not much. But, is that something we're gonna say, since we're sticking to strict DESI guidelines, we're strongly recommending individuals that are unvaccinated to still mask?
Just to your original question, Megan, about willingness to go beyond the 28th. My personal
Oh, yeah.
feeling is no.
Okay.
The second question though around future guidance and, as you pointed out with the survey question, the 70% who supported us doing so. I also point out that in the same letter Lori was quoting, it specifies that the commissioner of DESI will continue to monitor public health data, consult with medical experts and state health officials, and issue further guidance and/or requirements as needed. So I'm working under an expectation that as time goes on, DESI and other public health organizations may begin to provide us with a more clear metric upon which to reconsider masking. Whether, and I don't expect that we're ever going to be mandated to mask again by a state authority, given what's going on right now. But I
Right.
expect that we're going to see some kind of guidance in the future. We don't have it yet. I think a lot of people have commented on that. But I think my hope is that either we as a group or we with state health officials will continue to revisit this. I don't think the conversation is over tonight. I mean, it's going to continue to pop up for a period of time. I think that it would be reasonable for us to continue thinking about what some of those thresholds might be or other things might be that would cause us to reconsider whatever policy we put in place tonight. In the future, we have all authority to do at any time.
I would be curious, just pushing it out a week, pushing it out a week. What is pushing it out a week and what is not?
What, sorry?
That's okay. Pushing it out a week versus not. What is?
Well, so the nurses sent us a letter,
Sure, I
and,
read that,
yeah, and I
That's
think,
what I would be curious.
well, I think their concern is if people are traveling, and like what Jeff was kind of saying, I think Jeff kind of summarized their concern. If people are, so we're going to Disney World. People are gonna be here, there, and everywhere. They're coming back. If they choose not to wear a mask, they might not have symptoms of COVID yet. And there's a bunch of people that are coming in, we're trying this out, it's new, we're not gonna wear our masks. Is it gonna create a spike? That first week, like Jeff said, how are we gonna know if it's because we dropped the mask or if it's just, it was gonna happen anyway, because it's a week after vacation and, we're not at summer weather yet. The windows are still closed, it's still chilly, and people are still getting sick. So I guess that's the rationale behind, or at least that's my understanding of what the nurses asked was, in saying, can we push it a week? But I mean, again, we can vote. I agree with that. It sounds like Mike, Lori, and Adam did not.
I'm far from convinced that a week is going to do anything. I'm far from convinced that COVID spreads more during a vacation week in February or April than it does in February.
Yeah, and I mean, I have no idea. So we could come back and there might be,
I
no
think the best
spread,
people to
but
answer that question for us would be the individual parents themselves. If they're afraid of their kid getting COVID after vacation, they make the choice of what they want to do. If they want to go on a mask, they go on a mask. If they don't, they don't. If they want to keep their kid home, they keep them home. I mean, each individual, for equity's sake, needs to make their own decision. I mean, equity is not forcing one thing on everyone. It's letting everybody make their own choice. So I'm with Adam. I'm not convinced the week is going to do anything other than upset the majority of people. So if parents want to make the decision that they need a certain health decision for the week after February vacation, that's on them. I don't think, I'm not a health expert, you're not a health expert,
No.
he's not a health expert. Parents, when it comes to their own children, are pretty good health experts.
The
When it
nurses
comes to
are.
their own children. Yeah, nurses are, sure.
So just for clarity, the nurses are, I believe it's 2 weeks, March 14th is the.
Yeah, I think
meeting.
that-
Yeah, they said a week or two. I mean, I was
So March, I
thinking,
mean, 2 weeks is 2 weeks, right?
yes.
Not-
I mean, I think a week would be sufficient. If you're gonna get COVID from February vacation, you're gonna get it the week after.
Mike's point, one thing that just kind of occurred to me as he was saying that was, I expect that the first week that masks are no longer required, that we're going to see most percentage of students still wearing masks. As weeks go on, throughout the course of the year, once the requirements are lifted, when it's lifted, it's going to continue in that direction, unless it's a spike, unless something happens outside of it. But if we continue along the trend we have now, we have 6 cases in the district last week. If we continue at that low level of spread, I expect that we're going to see more and more families choose to remove masks over the course of the remainder of the academic year.
Definitely. And I
So-
think. Go ahead, sorry.
Giving people that choice to decide whether to send their child to school with a mask on February 28th.
And I hear you on giving the choice, because I do think parents know their children best. But there's 2 things I worry about, and one is certain children, and I don't know how many we have in the district, that might be high risk, where it might, I'm not convinced that wearing a mask, I think wearing a mask does stop the spread. So, and again, I'm not an expert, that's just what I think based on what I've read and what I've seen. So I guess I worry about children that, A, have a hard time wearing a mask, potentially special needs kids that might also be high risk. And then there's gonna be a bunch of other people not wearing a mask right after February break. So that's one thing I think about. The other thing I think about is teachers that are high risk, and how they feel about this. I know we had the union come on February 1st, and they stated they weren't ready. I don't know how they feel now. We haven't heard anything from them. All I know is we've heard from the nurses.
Is that after you heard any feedback from the teachers union prior to next week?
I have not.
So I'm just recognizing what time it is. I know we started a little bit.
Yeah, let's vote. I think we're clear. No, seriously, because I could go on and we're never gonna, so let's rip it
Yeah,
off.
so what I'd like to do is, are there any final thoughts before we move into a vote? No. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor right now to accept the DESI guidelines for the removal of the mask mandate, which means that we would remove them at 12:01 a.m. on February 28th, meaning kids could come to school on Monday morning. If their parents, with their parents' consent, wearing a mask or not, once they get off the bus, they have to wear it on the bus. So at this point, I'm going to take a vote. All in favor of accepting DESI guidelines for the removal of the mask mandate on February 28th? I'm an aye as well. Opposed?
No.
One opposed. The motion to accept the updated DESI guidelines passes. This means that on February 28th, which is the Monday following February vacation, masking will be optional in school buildings, left up to parental choice. It will, however, still be mandated on school buses as they fall under federal mandates. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept revisions to policy EBCFA.
Before I order, which revisions are we putting on the table?
Yeah, there's 2.
That's a good question.
We have two versions of this that have been presented to the committee. One of them is a recommendation from MASC that was drafted by them. And I also offered and submitted an alternative version of that after seeing the version from MASC.
So that's an excellent question. I believe it would be the MASC one, and then if we wanted to amend, we could go together. Adam, would that be correct?
Then who makes a motion, how it's made.
Who wants to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the MASC policy. Is it EBCFA
Yes.
as stated?
Second? I'll second it. We can discuss it.
Point of order.
Oh, I can't. Oh, Julie? Thank you, Ashley.
Still on it.
Discussion.
Yeah, if I could say something about this. So I was on the policy subcommittee when we originally amended the EBCFA policy back in August. MASC is not DC, it's a separate group. We actually pay money to become members of that group. I think of it as more of a lobbying group or an advocacy group, sort of like the Board of Realtors or the National Board of Accountancy, something like that. They do provide a lot of policies to us, and we look at those policies. We go through our policy book. We have a lot of their policies on our books. We have some policies that they don't have, that they don't make recommendations on. And some of our policies don't follow the similar policies that they have. So this policy is just a recommendation by them. We do not have to accept it. We can make our own. I'd like to say this policy, whoever wrote this should be fired. The way they've written this is fairly slanted. It mentions the best way to stop the spread of coronavirus is masking, where DC has just come out with the public health board and said, no, that's not the case. They've switched to vaccination. So it's factually incorrect if we accept this policy as is. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I like the amendments, the other changes. If we were to have those, the other policy that was recommended there, again, might need to be beefed up a little bit with a few things, but the policy here as MASC presented, I think it should be thrown in the trash.
Well, I mean, can we just remove that paragraph? I don't know if that's true or not. I did not research that. I think the CDC is still saying, you're saying the CDC is saying.
I think when DC made their announcement of masking, they said vaccination is the way to go. With the state being one of the highest states with vaccination rates. I have the press release here.
I mean, we can delete the paragraph. I think it's important to note that masks are still required in the school health offices. So the
That's
nurse,
fine.
I mean, we need to put that in there. People need to understand that if their kid falls down and gets a cut, you need to have a mask, because the nurses expressed concern that if they have to hand out masks, that's gonna cost us money.
Yeah, well, we already do that. I mean, we already hand out masks. My daughter comes home with a mask every day. So they are handing them out. I mean, if we're only worried about the small percentage that go to the nurse's office on a given day, I think we're probably actually gonna save one, because we won't need as many masks to be handed out. So the press release says, the decision was made in consultation with infectious disease physicians, Mass Department of Public Health, and other medical experts. Vaccinations are the best protection against COVID, whereas the policy says masking still. So that's a little disagreement we'll have to remove. The other part here is where they try to segregate kids based on health choices by wanting to mask unvaccinated and saying that vaccinated don't need to be masked. I don't think we should be separating our kids based on anything like that. I think that's a terrible way to go. I don't think that's equity, and I think that borders on bullying.
So Mike, are you suggesting we get rid of paragraph 2, which is according to public health, so experts, the spread, the face, the second one, the face covering covers the nose and mouth, and then the individuals who are vaccinated are not required to wear a mask when they do so desired. Are you suggesting we get rid of that part of this, move it forward?
What's that?
Oh, yes, sorry.
I believe this version of it is so flawed, it's not easier. I think we should start with something else. I think there's too many changes to make. So this is, of course, the process of amendments that I'd rather personally go down and then start with something that we can all agree to and then add to it.
Yeah,
I think that, for instance, maybe the point about the school, and I don't know, is that a requirement based on like a medical requirement that exists in the state today? It's stated here in NASC's recommended rooms that masks will be required in all health offices. Where's that requirement coming from, Jackie?
It's from the law, I think, Christie sent it to Mike.
Okay.
But it is required under federal, it's under federal law.
Okay.
Just like the buses.
So I'd rather start with a small policy and eventually add a couple clauses to it and try to.
That's fair.
remove from this.
Let's do it.
So do you want to move to a vote?
Well,
That's all the question on this policy.
so you don't want to start with this, you want to, so,
I would rather see us vote this down and then.
yeah, so can we, do we have to sit here and make the policy, or can we switch over to budget and have, can we do the policy for the next time, or does the policy need to be done before February 28th? So you guys,
So we can vote this
We
down,
vote this
Megan.
down.
vote this down, and then,
Then we can make a motion, do you want it for yours, and then we'll go from there.
all right,
We just need to expedite. Okay.
yep,
So, I'd like to, at this time, I'd like to ask about the policy EBCFA, if you are in favor. All in favor? Opposed? And I'm a nay as well. The policy does not pass. Now we're going to look at the other one in the drive.
Let's move the version that I submitted to the CFA alternative.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I'll just read that for everybody to see what we're starting with here. The beginning of this policy would be that the wearing of a face mask is optional in all schools. Effective at 12:01 a.m. on Monday, February 28, 2022, individuals are not required to wear a face covering on school property, but may do so if desired. By federal public health order, all students and staff are currently required to wear face coverings on school buses. If the federal public health order requiring the face coverings be worn on school buses would end, that requirement would also immediately end in the district. And at that time, individuals would not be required to wear face covering on school buses. I'd like to offer an amendment to my motion there to add a sentence from the other version, that being the sentence that says masks will be required in all school health offices, and insert that into this policy after the section on buses.
What about the quarantine? If you have COVID and you come back days 5 through 10?
We already have that in place.
Oh, that's already in another policy.
This policy is specifically covering the face mask.
All right, if that's in another policy, I think it's fine. I don't think you need to say it's strongly recommended for individuals who remain unvaccinated or immunocompromised. I think that's kind of legal jargon that's just trying to CYA. All right, that's fine.
So do you have any more discussion?
I just want to ask if we should, there was a question, the nurses also brought this question up about staff having to enforce parent decisions on mask wearing, how they didn't know which kids should be wearing, which kids shouldn't. So maybe we want to have something in there to the effect of teachers and staff should not be enforcing the mask wearing, and parents should have these conversations with their own children, develop their own plan, just as they would anything else. I also think, based on recent events, we should probably have something in there that says there shouldn't be any disciplinary action taken against a student, staff member, or visitor based on wearing or not wearing a mask or vaccination status. I think that's important to put in there. If anybody feels the same way, I could make a motion to amend that.
I don't think that's a good idea. So the first thing, why would somebody take a disciplinary action against somebody for not being vaccinated?
That's exactly a great question. I don't know. But
I mean, that's almost something that doesn't need to be said.
you would think.
Jeff, to the question of teachers and staff being asked to enforce their parents' desire for the kids to wear a mask, what are your thoughts on how that would play out in or not?
Give me an example.
So, a parent sent their child to school with a mask, or they told the mask at 10 o'clock and you take the mask off. I mean, when this we would expect teachers to tell kids to put the mask back on, because they came in with one, I assume that.
Talking about right now, or after
After
20,
28, yeah.
after 28, you just put policy in place to eliminate it, right? So there's,
Well, it's parental choice.
yeah, so if somebody came in with a mask, they have a mask, and if they don't have a mask, they don't, there's no.
There was a point that the nurses brought up.
They don't want it,
Parents who
don't
want
want to
them.
enforce.
Worried about parents who want them to continue to wear masks and parents expecting staff to reinforce it.
Meaning if
I don't
I
think
send
so.
my daughter in with the expectation that she's gonna wear it and she takes it off during the school day, are the teachers, is there an expectation that the teachers are gonna have?
I mean, we know the parents are gonna take part in case.
This is from the nurses.
But it's gonna happen.
I mean, you want them to teach, right? That's the first thing you want them to do, so. Kid takes the mask off, if the kid takes the mask off, and it's.
So I don't think it needs, do you feel it needs to be policy? It's just-
I don't think we should say this policy, because what about special needs kids? I mean, they're, at some point, are for preschoolers. I mean, there's a lot of things that, we also send our kids to school in underwear in preschool, and if they pee their pants, the teacher's gotta change them or they gotta send them home. So I mean, at some point, there's a And I get we're trying to do a blanket policy for the whole district, but when you're talking about little kids versus high school kids, you know, and even in the elementary school, I think it should be fine. But I mean, I guess it's almost better here to not say anything at all. I mean, you know, some of these special needs teachers might have to.
So Jeff just made an excellent suggestion, which I appreciate. I think to move on to the budget, what we should do is take a vote on this, and then we should send it on to the policy committee for further review to bring back.
For next time, yeah, which Chris
So just
said.
take another vote after this one.
As,
So
Adam
please,
has
take a
it.
vote to send this policy subcommittee.
All right, fine.
All meant by, going to amend this one, yeah.
You can vote on this one, so that'll be the policy. Then you vote to send that, this policy, to the policy subcommittee to review.
Okay, so I'd like to, I'd like to take the vote on accepting the amended EBCFA policy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm an aye as well. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. We will accept the policy EBCFA as written. Now, I'd like to entertain a motion to send our new policy EBCFA to the policy committee for any revision.
So moved.
Excellent. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Opposed? The motion passes. It will be sent, our new policy, EBCFA, as amended, will be sent over to the policy committee for review. So I would like to, is there a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
Roll call. Adam?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
I am an aye as well. This concludes our meeting. Please stay tuned for the budget hearing.
Okay, on the budget, they're gonna get-
All right, good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Madison Regional School Committee to order. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. Your image and or voice may be broadcast. To the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin, do we have any public comments? The consent agenda. Get the right agenda, I apologize.
I'll move the consent agenda to accept the open meeting minutes from February 2022.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mark. Second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Opposed? Okay, the motion to accept the consent agenda as presented passes. Any communications? All right, we're going to move on to our report section, which will be Mr. Zaney and Mr. Conway on the budget presentation.
Take a board meeting. It's good to see you again.
Ready, Robert?
You want me to start? Is that visible to people? Is that visible to people? Jeff, you want to lead us off?
What?
Are you going to lead us off?
Yeah, I will. Okay, well, so, we're gonna go over, we met in December, talked about the budget, talked about, some of the things we look at in terms of savings. So we present a full budget tonight and then after a vote on it. So to start off, our goals haven't changed. It's to, we designed this is to maintain our existing programming, what we saw as level services, to support the district improvement plan, and to implement the other priorities. So that would be above level services that we talked about. And then to provide that additional support that we're going to need, that we need now for to support our students through COVID. And also to look at some other funding sources we have, such as grants and things like that, to help absorb some of the impact for the towns.
This is just, for, I know we have some new members, this is just a high-level overview of the budget process. We basically got to the preliminary budget in December. One thing I want to point out is, well, we get some feedback from towns, we get information from the state that helps us make decisions, but this part of the process will go on beyond tonight. The towns, tonight is the first time they see what the actual assessments are, as we're not able to provide that until we get the state data. We've also made revisions to the budget, so that feedback loop is going to continue after tonight's meeting. We meet with the towns, one town tomorrow night and one, I think, in 2 weeks.
So we included this slide. This is part of the enrollment piece that we did last month. I think it was last week, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to show you, because this question came up, I think both Adam and Mike sort of talked about this. This goes out to 2031. Now, I said during the original presentation that there are two conditions which going out that far is not that accurate. You have big error, up to 30%. One, when you have roughly 1,000 kids in the school, and then the other one when you have a building that's out of control, not out of control, but we have increased growth. So we have both of them in our town. And so, but I did want to put it on here. You saw a little dip there in 2020, which all schools in the state tended to have, all public schools. But you see an increase, K-12, continuing through to 2031. I'll point out that the NASDAQ projections have consistently been a little bit lower than our actual numbers. That number out there is 1297, approximately 1,300 students, roughly 300 that we have now. Now, these projections don't include school choice students, so you can add roughly another 100 students to that by today's standards. So maybe it's 150 to 200 then, depending on, and that's all a question of how many seats open and how many seats that the school committee will vote on. So I wanted to show you that there is a projected growth out to 2031. The next slide just shows it's the same graph done in a bar graph form, so you can actually see the numbers there. Bob, can you go to the next one, please? This is the one I wanted to talk about. This is per pupil spending. Now, that consists of all the things that we use. So that's teacher salaries, that's material costs, that's all of the things that go into educating a student. So and Bob's going to talk a little bit more about this and kind of flesh it out a little bit more, but if you just use that number today, and you assume that between now and 2031, I think it's conservative to say that 400 kids there'll be 400 extra kids in this district. And it'd probably be more like 500. But if you just look at the per pupil expenditure today, and remember that's going to increase. The teacher salaries go up, the price of instructional materials go up. So that number just continues to climb, as it does with every district. If you just assume 300, which I think is way under what it would be, that's almost $5 million to the budget. every student is representing roughly $16,000. That's another $5 million. If you took the middle cost and said it was 400 students, that's closer to $7 million. And if you went out to 500 more students, which I don't think is unrealistic, given the building that's going on, it's roughly about $8 million added to the budget just of kid walking. And that's assuming that these are all general education kids. You have to remember, we have, roughly 17%, 16% special education students in that district. And each one of those kids could be between 75,000 if they're in outplacement, up to 300,000. That's certainly not all of them. The majority of those we educate right in that district. We try to do that. But you need to think about this. You need to think about what happens when you increase enrollment. And if you can't stabilize the enrollment in the district, you cannot stabilize the budget. There's no possible way to stabilize the budget if you can't stabilize the amount of kids that come into the school year after year. As it is, there's some guesswork to it. So once you factor in building, I showed you the building permits, especially in Doyle's, there's a lot more building going on. You can see where these numbers can go, and it can take a dip like it did last year, but I wouldn't, given what we're seeing, I wouldn't count on it. And the reason I say this is because you're going to look at this budget, and it's certainly a little bit higher than the towns have asked us to go. But the idea with increased enrollment, as we've seen over the last couple of years and into the future, that we could maintain 2.5% increase is almost impossible. This is almost impossible to do. Again, if you can't stabilize the population, the enrollment, you cannot stabilize the budget. It just continues to grow. So I want you to keep that in mind. We have made some significant cuts, and we're going to talk about those. But remember, everything we cut comes at a cost to a student. You cut a program, that's instruction, that's a benefit a student doesn't get. And we certainly will do what the town's will is, what the committee's will is. But please keep that in mind when these enrollment numbers, when you look at these slides. Bob, could you flesh this out just a little bit more?
Sure, so just wanted to highlight a couple other things. So the first thing that I looked at there, when I saw it jumped out to me a little bit, was Shrewsbury's a pretty good district, and that's below us, and that kind of jumped to my attention. So one thing about that, Shrewsbury is a lot bigger than us, and they're able to leverage some of their costs over more students. The other thing is that they have high 20 kids in their elementary school classrooms, and that's something that we've heard our two towns do not want to have. So bear that in mind when you see the low number for Shrewsbury. The second thing is, in addition to Shrewsbury, they just passed an override over, I think it was last year, and over 3 to 4 years, they're going to see a significant increase in their school spending. So they'll be more in line with us. Grafton has been historically in the bottom 10% or even lower than that in the state. I don't really know much why that is, so it's not necessarily a district we would want to compare to, but it's part of our Aspen Valley peer group. So the other quick point is that you see the state average is 17,575. We are at about, just for round numbers, about 1,000 less per student. We have 1,050 students, just to make math easy for me. 1,000 times 1,000 is $1 million. So our budget to be at state average would be $1 million higher in FY20 than it was. So that just gives some context to, to get us to state average spending, it's $1 million more than the current budget. So now we're going to just go over the changes that we made since our preliminary budget. So just to orient you at the top, we have last year's budget, what the preliminary level service budget was is the $19,230,000, a 7.3% increase on our level service budget. And then we have adjustments here. The first adjustments to the transportation revolving. We have the transportation revolving fund the committee approved 2 years ago. We're budgeting to use that for the first time. We anticipate we'll have $50,000 going into it every year. we'll be able to use that to offset our transportation expenses. We are planning on the second item to prepay for some special ed transportation costs, which is legally permitted for that category of spending. It's one of the only exceptions where you can prepay for future fiscal year expenses. The next two items are, we have grants for special ed, and we've been able to preserve the balances in the grants so that we can carry a little bit more forward to next year. So we're going to use that to offset what we would normally pay for in the budget. And the same thing applies with the music therapy services, where we were able to carry forward. We had money set aside in the grant for it, and we were able to carry that forward next year and preserve some of those funds. 20,000 increased usage of school choice funds. I was fairly conservative in the preliminary budget and what I budgeted to use in Berlin, and we have the capacity to use more. We used school choice funds to offset teacher salaries in the general fund budget, and we receive school choice funds in general for taking school choice kids into the district. It's $5,000 per student, and we try to spend about what we receive on school choice funds. The Worcester Regional Pension information was an estimate. It wasn't available at the time of the preliminary budget, and I received the actual data from Worcester Regional shortly after the new year. And the last item is we've had a series of different adjustments related to students attending charter schools, out-of-district placements, and choice schools where between the time we prepared our preliminary budget and now, we've got updated information on what those costs are.
Hey, Bob?
Yeah.
Before you go to the next slide, I know when we work on this, that, and I know in the past working with the IDs, that some of these items, like especially that transportation revolver and school choice, this is typically where we have a safety net. And I know I always feel uncomfortable when we dig into it, and so could you just talk a little bit about that so the committee has an idea?
Sure. So this we'll be able to continue to do in the future. We won't necessarily be able to carry over to 2 years of grant funds, prepay for special ed, and it's nice to not budget for that because if a student moves into town, and we've had 4 in the past year and a half that are going to impact next year's budget, we don't have the capacity to absorb that in the budget. We feel like with where we are this year, we need to be a little bit more aggressive in offsetting our cost increases. And we typically have a little bit of a balance at the end of the year in our budget, so we felt like this is a year we need to be a little bit less conservative to get our budget to a level that the towns might be able to accept. It's a difficult balancing act. We'll talk about it more as we go forward. So all in all, that brings our level service budget. Total adjustments is the $302,000, and the overall increase is 5.6 on our level service budget.
So on the above level services, this is what we talked about in December. We presented all of these items. These are all personnel related items that, again, we want to make investments in. We thought that even going forward, given the last couple of years, the investment in our personnel would be really the thing that was going to help our students. Some of those we had to take out. Again, you'll see them again in our district improvement plan. A new one is coming up that you're going to vote on in September, but this is what was left. So the 2 items in yellow, we managed to keep those in, but we funding them with grant money. One with the IDA special education grant, and the other one with ESSA 3 grant, I believe. And then in green would be the ones that are funded in the budget, as you can see there. One is the curriculum assistant. This was an existing position. This was an assistant for the assistant superintendent. And we combined a couple of roles up in the central office to allow that position to remain. And it's already paying, that position is existing, and it's already paying benefits. It gives Carol a chance to get in the schools and work with the principals and work with the teachers, which is really what's needed, and it's especially needed now that we've gone through this COVID. The other position was the elementary literacy coordinator. We talked to you about that. That was a position. We have a math coordinator coaching right now. Someone to provide classroom peer observations, to model lessons in the classroom, to prepare professional literacy-related professional development for teachers, and just to work with them on their instruction. Again, and this will be a benefit to our students. The final position we kept down there was the Tohoto, an addition of one counselor to the Tohoto counseling department. This would allow us to do a few things. One, to have one counselor for 9 and 10. That would also handle PSATs and AP testing coordination. Another one that would handle the students in grades 11 and 12. And that person would also handle the internship and the shadowing program that we're introducing, again, so we could expand programming a bit. And then, not a bit, I think that's gonna be great for our students. It's one of the things that's gonna separate us from other high schools. And then finally, we will have one guidance counselor to work specifically with middle school students, where we're seeing a lot of issues, especially now with COVID. Those are the students who really, especially sixth graders, they've never been in the building, and we've never even seen their faces. So there's a lot of work to be done in middle school. So we kept that position, and we thought it would be critical in the coming years for our students. So those are the above-level services we kept. Again, we really just 3 of them are going into the budget.
Do you want questions as we go, or
You can ask them now.
why haven't we kept everything? I guess I'm trying to understand what guidance are we getting from the town that says we need to stay below a certain number that has prevented us from funding some of the other things that we're looking to.
We'd love to fund them all. Again, the town gives us numbers, we'll get to that part, but I'll say this, what we did was, when we took the entire list, we said, we can't keep all of these, but if you remember when we talked about the new district improvement plan, the one you guys are gonna vote on in September, we said that you'll see these again. So we took them, we just said, all right, if we have to cut some of these, how are we gonna prioritize them? Let's take the things we absolutely need next year and keep those in the budget. And then the other things we'll sort of prioritize. So I'll give you an example. That classroom teacher up there for ACE's building, he doesn't absolutely need that this year because he can move a teacher around. But the year after that, there's no way he can't not have that teacher because there won't be enough teachers in that building for the incoming classrooms. We're seeing kindergarten classrooms fit up between 50 and 60 kids now, which we didn't see before. So you can't do that with just 2 teachers. And so again, that will be on the first year, the first year of the transitional district improvement. You'll see that. But we would have loved to keep. We think all of them are important. So you'll definitely see them again. We think they're that important, but we'll try to prioritize them. And you get the answer to the other part of your question, Adam, about why we have to do that.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we'll show you. So we'll talk about later with the towns. So this basically takes our level service budget that we just showed you of the 18,928, adds in the cost of the level service request, and you can see where they're allocated by school. The curriculum assistant support is district role, so it's across all 3 schools. The ELA coach is just in the 2 elementary schools, and Tohoto has its share of the curriculum assistant, and the bulk of that is the the school counselor. So that brings us to a proposed operating budget increase. The operating budget number there, the increases are 6.7 for Berlin Memorial, Boylston is 10.9%, Tohoto is 5%, an overall increase of 6.8%. Typically, the range that we're presenting to the towns is 3 to 4% for a little bit on the high side, but somewhere it's the typical range. But we'll talk more too about this because we are getting more state revenue. So we'll talk about how this all fits together. But this is the expenditure increase to the operating budget. Just a highlight of what it is by school. This has been something historically people are interested in. The Berlin Memorial increase in terms of what makes up that 6.7%. The bulk of that, almost 2/3 of that is, more than 2/3 of that, I think. No, just under 2/3 of that is the out-of-district tuitions and transportation. And this is again from students that are newly identified in the district, needing to be either through moving in or preschool age that have needed to be placed in a private school outside the district. And the transportation that goes with that. The other piece is the most significant contributor is the teachers' union contract increases. And then there is an offset. This math coach is currently shared between the two schools, and we're doing that. We didn't budget for it last year. We made the decision and figured out how to pay for it within FY22, but FY23 is the first time we're budgeting for that. So that relieves half of the cost of that person out of Berlin Memorial's budget. And then the last piece is the cost of the above level service items we previously presented. Boylston Elementary, a lot's happened there. Again, primarily though, close to half of it is out-of-district tuitions, transportation, paraprofessionals, and special ed contract services. Just the needs have become fairly intense in that school and their students attending schools outside the district. The teachers union contract increases is 76,000. We've also seen an increase in the number of people participating in the healthcare plan. So the cost of benefits for those employees for healthcare plans has gone up. The cost of sharing the math coach is 48,000 with Berlin Memorial. You'll see that this isn't exactly, it's not a net with Berlin because we've also factored in tutor support with the person switching to become a coach position. The tutors provide direct instruction, tier 2 instruction to students. So there was that tutor support that was needed in addition to the coach. So that 48 is a little bit of a tutor cost plus half of the math coach. And again, the same above level service items that we showed before. The Tonto, it's a similar story. The out-of-district tuitions and instead transportation and paraprofessionals are driving a large part of the budget. This doesn't happen every year. This is an unusual year. And again, this is why we're faced with the challenge of arriving at a budget that's relatively reasonable increase. Teachers' contract increases is in healthcare, again, affecting Tohoto. Then a counselor position, and we have a couple offsets there that are moderating the increase at Tohoto as well. Also just going to highlight what capital we presented this pretty quickly at the end of the last meeting, but this is the capital for Berlin Memorial. We had a firm go through and do a full assessment of the capital needs of the Berlin Memorial School, and 54,000 is going to go towards addressing level 2 and level 3 priorities on that assessment. We didn't have any level 1 critical immediate priorities. We worked through part of level 2, and we think we're going to get into level 3 priorities through the use of these funds. And that'll be kind of an ongoing item in our future capital plan as well. The entry access security is something there's a possibility we may pull this out. If you look at the entrance to Berlin Memorial School, it's a little bit different than the other two schools. This will be something that's also in Tohonto's plan. The person at the front desk has a clear line of sight to letting people in at Berlin Memorial School. And part of the entry access security best practices is to have a lock on both the first door and the second door. The thought is at Berlin Memorial, the principal has commented, well, you may not need that at school, even though it's kind of a recommended best security practice, because they're going to see people they're letting in. So this is something we may end up pulling back and redirecting to the first line So I just wanted to highlight that. The items for Boylston are listed there. The library roof repairs, it seems like we have some type of roof repair annually. At some point, this is going to be a much larger capital article, but we are able to, by doing this, buy some more time with that roof. We would like to eventually, for this building, do a facilities assessment like we did for Berlin Memorial. But right now, these were our three top priorities. The asphalt repairs and improvements, some of those were made last year. We're going to continue with the next areas that are priority. And the scrubber for hall cleaning will enable the work of cleaning the floors to get done a lot more effectively and efficiently to help us get our schools ready for the beginning of the school year a lot quicker than we have been able to the last couple of years. Excuse me. For Tohoto, the first two items are just payments on the bonds we have outstanding for when how we funded this building. Those are going to be fairly steady over the next, I think, 10 years to 12 years that are left on those bonds until they're paid off. The second item, the rooftop units, you see them as you're driving up on top of the building. Oh, thanks. That will replace either 2 or 3 of those motors. We've had, I think, about 4 or 5 of those replaced in the past 2 years. It seems like their useful life must be pretty close to 10 years when this was built because they're all starting to fail and the motors need to be replaced. The last item is for enhanced security up at the front where not just the first door, but the second door would be locked. It would give front desk an opportunity to see visitors step into the vestibule before they're admitted into the building. You might have seen that in some other high schools that you've attended. Excuse me. So the budget's paid for in 2 ways. One, it's by assessments to the town. The other way is we have revenue that offsets the expenditures we receive. So the revenues we're getting primarily come in the form of state aid, the bulk of them. We've had very flat, about 1%, 2% increases in the time that I've been here. The Student Opportunity Act was approved, I believe, 3 years ago. And through that act, it calls for changes to the foundation budget, which is the baseline amount that a school is supposed to be funding its students for, and it varies based on grade level, varies based on demographics like income, English language learners, special ed. But basically what the foundation budget does is it says this is the minimum amount you should have to run your school. And then what it does is it says how much should be paid for by the towns by looking at the relative income and commercial property values of the town. So communities like Berlin and Boylston, about 80% of the budgets are paid by the town and 20% is paid by the state through Chapter 71 funding. Communities like Worcester would be the exact opposite. Still, even with that, our Chapter 78 in FY23 is increasing by 12% over FY22, which is a huge help to our budget, as you'll see when we look at the assessments. We're also seeing an increase in charter tuition reimbursement. The rules for people who are familiar with charter schools, we get a small amount back from the state when we have students attend other districts. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm sure it was because districts lobbied about the impact of charter schools. There's also a provision that says when you have a year where there's a significant increase, like we did during the beginning of the pandemic, that the following year you receive almost a 1-for-1 dollar amount for what that increase is. So we're going to get that $79,000 next year, but it's one time. We're not going to keep getting it, but that's still good news for next year. And then lastly, we're seeing a decrease in circuit breaker fundings. due to lower claims. What we've seen is our special education costs are up here, they've gone down, and now they're coming back up. The reimbursement you get, it occurs a year after. So we're now in a cycle where the circuit breaker revenue we're getting is based on the year when we didn't have any special education costs. This doesn't really match what our expenditures are, because our budget's actually going up. And these are the dollars that go with that. Again, the Chapter 78 is the big change. The Chapter 71.8 is for transportation. As a regional district, we get that for students that live more than 1.5 miles from the school. And those are the other categories. The one thing I want to highlight here is we have an excess and deficiency fund. I have not budgeted, sometimes the charter reimbursement will change, so I've only budgeted a $5,000 increase. I've instead budgeted to use the excess and deficiency fund because if for some reason the charter reimbursement amount changes, I don't want to have to go back. We'd have to go back to the towns if we were going to have a shortfall in revenue to try to get a budget increase. Or we'd basically have to cut our budgeted spending. By using E&D instead, once our budget's approved, even if the state aid changes, we don't have to go through kind of an additional budget exercise. So, but in total, state aid's up 281,000, 282,000, and the district revenue, including the use of E&D, is up 87,000. This is just a high-level picture of which categories of spending. Administration would be primarily central office, although not all central office positions. The special ed director and the assistant director for teacher and learning roll into the instruction category. Other school services includes things like the nurse, athletics, food service, maintenance and operations is basically facilities costs and also some technology costs. More of the infrastructure technology costs. Fixed charges is benefits and pension costs. And tuitions is out-of-district tuitions, like a book. So the bulk of the dollars are going to instruction there. You can see there is an increase, though, in the tuition line a little bit. But this is how DESI kind of looks at the high-level functions of spending across the school. Those are just for your reference. They're in the slides for you to have in the future. Aside from the general fund budget, we also use revolving funds. We pay for some school expenses out of revolving funds. These are the key funds. We have other funds that are smaller, but these are really the key funds. What I want to highlight here, Jeff brought this up before, the question of our safety nets. And if you look at Boylston, the school choice revenue we're bringing in, we've had less students attending. We've had larger class sizes, larger numbers of students in town in Boylston coming into kindergarten. We've also had a pandemic, which affected the thinking of maybe not wanting to take new kids in during a pandemic or having a hard enough time educating our own kids. So we went from 73,000 in revenue and school choice revenue in Boylston in FY21 to 43,000 this year. Out of that 43,000, all but 3 students are in 5th grade. So next year, that number would go down to 15,000, but in discussions with ACE, we're planning to take in 3 more kids. So that's the 30,000. But if you go down to the bottom, so right now, this is what we're planning to use in next year's budget. This balance gets down to 77,000. We'll be at a point where we'll basically exhaust that next year if nothing changes. And one of my, we talked about, kind of the risk. It's going to have to be a priority in the FY24 budget to basically just fix that in the Boylston budget where we can't rely on school choice anymore. We could take a little bit, basically maybe spend what we take in. So I do foresee a FY24 budget challenge specifically for Boylston Elementary School. It's not an issue for the other 2 schools. You can see they have healthy balances. Berlin has for its size school, has a very healthy balance. We could even use that to fund an unexpected facilities need that came up. And Tohonto's in good shape as well, although we do, because we know it's in good shape, we've been kind of planning to spend it down a little bit by taking in $370,000 next year, budgeting to spend $570. We feel like we have a balance that's maybe more than we need to have. It's nice to have, but in a year with a challenging budget, we felt like we should draw that down a bit to offset the budget increase. It's similarly in circuit breaker. So the revenue that we received in FY21 was based on expenses in FY20 that were high. And this is what we used and spent during FY21. The revenue that we received here was because we had a lot of special education expenses that students had graduated or moved out of the district this year, so our expenses were less. So this is the revenue. We expect this is going to come up a little bit next year and then jump significantly the year after. So that'll help the FY25 budget. What we typically do there is we typically spend, this would be an example, we typically try to spend, our beginning balance was 474. We typically try to spend what the beginning balance was and carry forward the revenue from the prior year. This year, we're going to be in a case where we need to kind of dip into and go beyond that in FY23. So we'll be taking in $240,000, but we're planning to spend some of that. We're going to end up at an end of year balance of $132,000. Technically, that 132 still serves as a safety net, but one placement can cost $300,000. That's not a normal placement. A placement under collaborative is probably more like $65,000, $70,000. But so I just wanted to highlight that. We've seen a shift in over time. You can look back at the beginning when the ratio of students for Boylston over a period of time significantly increased to the point where it was more than double in 2017. We're seeing that come back to be a little bit closer. What that means is that Berlin's paying for a larger share of the Tohoto budget than it has as those numbers become closer. The Tohoto budget's allocated by regional agreement, which is essentially based on that enrollment level. So now I'm going to jump into how this pulls together and leads to the town assessment. So this factors in the revenue that we have in terms of state aid. It factors in the expense budgets, and the expense budgets are offset by the state aid that we're getting to arrive at these percent increases. So we have for the town of Berlin, this is how they typically will look at their expenses, look at their budget overall. What is the assessment impact? Overall, it's a 5.3% assessment increase to the town, $361,000. They had initially communicated an increase that they desired an increase of 2.5% to us. What I've shown at the bottom is that an increase, different increase levels. I'll use this one as an example, because this is kind of my guess as what might be the guidance. 3.5% increase. We would be able to increase our budget by 238. We're at 361. We'd have to cut another $123,000. So we hope to make the case to them on what we're doing, why it's important. But those numbers kind of give us an idea of what we would have to cut to reach different level targets. For Boylston's a little bit less, and you can see if you go back, Tohonto's increase for Berlin is 5.4%. And for Boylston, it's 2.4%. And that's really because of the increased number of Berlin students attending Tohoto. So all in all, it's a 4.9% increase for the town of Boylston. It's either reached the different targets there. We're not as far off. Those would be fairly substantial numbers to cut if we were pushed to do so. We also provide guidance to the town of Boylston, however, on the vocational costs. This is some potential good news. Not necessarily for the students who want to attend ASABET. It's becoming very difficult for those students of towns who aren't members of ASABET, which Boylston is not a member. The people who are in member towns are getting priority. The number of students who are wanting to attend, there may even be wait lists for the students from member towns. It's not clear whether there's even going to be any spots for non-resident towns. In the past, we've been able to get students accepted. From a financial standpoint, this means we're likely going to see a decrease in ASABET Valley enrollment. So all in all, we're projecting a decrease of 137,000 or 19.4%. When the town looks at its assessments, they typically also look at the vocational with it. And this $137,000 increase would be pretty close to this number. The town might look at that and say, well, 3.5%. I think they have a little bit more growth in Boylston than they do Berlin. That might be something that they can accept. So we're hopeful. Again, we'll see. I will just mention too, I'm not going to go through these, but there are some supporting slides with how some numbers were derived and split out by school. But I will not go through those at this point. I wanted to pause here and see if there's any questions on what was presented. Yeah.
So one of the things I was, as we were presenting the school choice information, trying to understand a little bit is, so we're going to potentially bring in traditional school choice into VES next year. At what cost, or what do we get for revenue for each of those placements?
We would receive 5,000, and if there's any additional special ed costs, we would get an increment to cover those additional special ed costs.
Who sets that $5,000 rate? Is that us or is that a statewide?
The state sets it, and I've made the case, all these numbers in the state go up every year. Why hasn't school choice gone up? It was voted, I think, 20 years ago, and it's not indexed to inflation. So I have my theories as why. They probably are not going to favor districts that are net school choice receiving districts, and I think they're trying to push in the impact to districts that lose students.
Yeah.
That's more my political thought. But in theory, this is there solely for us if we have extra space. We're not going to do this if it's going to cause us to hire another teacher, because it doesn't pay for itself. But if we have a class of, we had this case come up where we had, I think, 23 kids in an elementary school grade at Berlin Memorial. It's an awful lot for kindergarten. And thought, well, if we're going to have two classes, 11 and 12, we can certainly afford to add 3 or 4 school choice students. I think in ACE's case, there might be one grade where we can probably take group 2 and another grade where we can take 1, but we're not accepting any in kindergarten or first grade, because we know there's time for that to grow over time, but as we get closer to 3rd, 4th, and 5th, would be the grades potentially even second if it's a really small class, we'd look at it. And then we also look at it when the students get to Tohoto, the combination of Berlin and Boylston. If the class size is particularly small, we might look at it. There's the incoming next year's 6th grade class is very small, and it's significantly smaller than typically a rising 5th grade to 6th would be. That might be a case where we want to take students then. And we also lose some students in 9th grade we also lose some to AMSA, we also lose some to the 9th grade to ASABET, particularly with the Berlin students. So there's some certain points where it makes sense.
At Tohoto, how much demand is there for seats from other district students that we're not meeting right now?
I don't think.
We've already received for next year, and we really haven't done, any advertising yet. We haven't even given our recommendations. We already have 5
applications.
For sixth grade?
For next year, no, for varying
Oh,
grades.
next year.
Yeah, for varying grades.
Is that high comparatively to what?
In comparison to what we've seen in fall, well, because of COVID the past couple of years.
Yeah.
But yet we're seeing applications come or requests earlier than we typically would see.
Okay. And then you said the magic word before I did, which was inflation. To what extent are we calculating 7.5% annual inflation rate into these numbers?
Into the budget?
Yeah.
We're not.
The other thing I remember about is school choice, that, that's a source of revenue for us, but as you start increasing enrollment of your own students, it becomes less and less possible that you're gonna take school choice kids. So not only do you start to grow the amount of students, and they start to strain the system, but you lose the revenue from the school choice students also.
Or if they're paying 16.5 a piece, which is the cost per student, it'd be a different story potentially. If they're only getting $5,000 for every one, that's a totally different math problem.
Yes, there's a balance there. We don't necessarily want to be filling up our schools with it, but if there's opportunities, we also rely on it right now in our budget. When you saw that enrollment trend chart, you might see that over time, we're not going to have space to accept any school choice students. So it might be something as time diminishes. I think right now we probably have the lowest amount of school choice seats in the elementary schools we have in my time here. So some of that's just happening naturally because we have more kids coming in both towns that are of school age coming up to kindergarten than in the past. I just want to correct my previous statement about not factoring inflation into the budget. That's not true. We factored it specifically into the oil budget, a little bit into the electricity budget. Every time I receive a contract, if the increase is more than 3%, I call the vendor and complain and say, we're in a pandemic, we're schools, and have pity on our kids. And usually it works, sometimes it doesn't. So we do fight inflation, and then I budgeted for it for oil and utilities. And there's certain places where we know things we budgeted.
Bob, yes. I still see the fourth nurse being budgeted in there, and I know when we talked about that, it was specifically a one-year thing to handle the additional COVID, contact tracing, and test and stay strain. We don't have that now. So based on your numbers in the fall, we were within the state guidelines for nursing. It's a significant salary that I'm sure we could use another teacher or another program or something. So what's the continued need for that if we only needed it to increase in COVID?
Well, we're finding that out of the grant, I believe.
Yeah,
One of the
that's a grant, right?
Out of the ESSER 3 grant.
Yeah, the other thing is, we don't know what next year's gonna be. I mean, you make a good point, it's just, we don't know what next year's gonna look like, so.
Right.
That's why we put it in as a one-year position. You know, if we are aware that they've asked for a permanent position. And we're not convinced of that, but certainly not knowing what next year's gonna bring, we put it in for that 1 year. So,
I just wondered, the tight budget with inflation, and
Yeah.
need for so many other services, how do you balance that based on the fact that all that additional work that we wanted that for is no longer necessary?
well, again, it may have even been a different story if we were able to pay for that out of the grant. So that factors into it also. It's a legitimate question. It is.
By having it in the grant, we have the flexibility to decide what we're going to do between now and the end of the year. If we had it in the
Yeah.
budget, it's basically in there. And
So it could potentially change to something else that's necessary.
It could, in the grant, we previously had some dollars in there for more tutor support than we were able to obtain.
I don't want to get off this, I don't want to get off this nurse thing for a second. The nurse is a contracted position with the company, so, we pay that over a finite amount of time. So technically, if we didn't need that nurse after X amount of months, we could terminate that contract with the vendor. So it's not like hiring someone permanently, so.
All right. Yeah,
It does give us flexibility as well.
like you mentioned, though, you know, it's a grant money. You said you spent on some other kind of position, tutor or language coach or whatever, we know that's sorely needed right now with everything with all the last 3 years. I don't know, I wonder if you could spend differently.
We'll certainly look at it, you know, we're certainly gonna look at it as we move through the year.
Right.
That's a good question.
So I guess my question is a little about the strategy from where we are today to where we go to the town in the next couple of weeks, it sounds like. And why we may go over the number, go over what we had originally budgeted versus going and asking them for funding to cover the requests that have come in.
The original request you made in December?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what, when we were thinking about this, we knew it was gonna be a difficult budget year. We knew we had, as Bob said, we had, a lot of this is being driven by those, district costs, which we might not have every year. That's why we talked about originally introducing the district, a new district improvement, as goes up to 25, but the same, you know, we want all these things informed, put priority on personnel, but let's prioritize the ones that we really need this year, and then the ones we'll need down the road. Like I say, BES can live without a teacher this year, they can't next year, so it'll be there next year, so it's not like they're going away, it's not like we're saying, if we don't get all the stuff next year, you're not gonna see it again. These are important positions, but we just thought in terms of, we could get by without some of them this year, some of them we can't. So, given the cost of some of those items, other items you've seen, we have no control over, we just put a priority on them.
So help me understand the process from here. So having never gone through this process in this seat before, we're taking this budget to finance committees, is that correct? And then-
Yeah, well, in a regional district, let me give you a couple of things to be aware of. In a regional district, it has to pass 2/3 of the member towns. Well, since we have 2 towns, it has to pass both of them. If it doesn't, you could potentially do a revote, but this goes to a town meeting. If it doesn't pass, we could potentially be stuck with a 112 budget, which is set by DESI. And oftentimes it's flat, so whatever our budget was this year could just be the same next year, which is untenable. This doesn't work.
That's not desirable.
What's that? Yeah. So we do want to, so the FinCom will make a recommendation on our budget. We do want to get their support. We did present already to them, at least the Berlin FinCom, our preliminary budget. They communicated 2.5% early. We presented this, and they gave us feedback later that kind of reiterated. They didn't quite say 2.5, but they kind of implied closer to 2.5. So I believe that we want to demonstrate that we're kind of working with them to try to provide something. We're also trying to advocate for students, so we have to find a balance. I think if we presented 12 things, we wouldn't have credibly presented that we're trying to listen to their concerns at all. And I think that we have developed a relationship where they trust us and they work with us. We've received their support from through every budget, a little grudgingly from Boylston in one year, but from Berlin pretty much throughout. And this is really the first time they've presented any kind of guidance that they were looking for something a little smaller because of their own particular challenges.
What that all translates to is we'd like this to pass without any more cuts, if we could avoid it.
Bob, you made a comment on the special education across the 3 schools, I think it's somewhere around 600,000.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
You made a comment that that's not every year, it fluctuates up and down. So are they not here for 12 years, 10 years? How?
No, this represents an increase versus last year. So these same costs could carry forward next year, but it's not going to be a $600,000 budget increase.
All right, that was my misunderstanding, thank you. And then, so when you're presenting this to the town, like I'm a taxpayer in Berlin, okay? I see a 5% tax increase coming through or whatever that translates to on my taxes. inflation's coming up, next winter is gonna be hard to, most of the towns, most of the homes in Berlin heat with oil, right? So that's gonna be a tight budget for everybody. And then I look at the per pupil spending, we're at the lower end of it, right? So what can you tell what's your strategy to tell taxpayers, hey, listen, we're not even spending as much as some other towns, what do they get for this?
Well-
I mean, they're not getting more teachers, they're not getting more programs, they're not getting more, it sounds like it's most of it just going to contracting increases in salaries, no additional teachers or additional sports or arts or anything like that,
Well, a lot of it is, I mean, that's the reason we presented it, even in December, the way we presented it, is to show, that even without increasing, making these above level requests, there were big increases this year, and most of them are out of our control. So I think all towns need to make a decision really, and the reason we laid it out like we did is every one of those things on that above level surface, it has a cost. That, and the town has to decide if, we know there's inflation. If they decide inflation is too much, we don't want to support this, then it translates to not supporting the education for the students too. That's how it translates. And we've talked about this as a leadership team. And basically, the reason we presented that first budget like we did, Mike, is to say, let's lay out everything we believe we need to support our students and then to move forward. And then we'll cut in order to get close to what the town recommends. But at some point, it's not our decision. It's your decision as a school committee and it's the town's decision. If they said, for example, inflation's high, oil price up, all of this stuff, we can't do it. We take all of that out. But we want to make the town aware and to say, well, listen, you don't have to support this, but if you don't, here's all of the things that you don't get, because all of these have a cost. It's just like everything else. And we try to stretch our resources as much as possible, but there are some things, like those spend costs, that are just out of our control. So we still try to move forward. Obviously at a slower pace, because now we have these other things just to maintain services. I think that's what it is. I think it's a pretty straightforward conversation. Here's what everything costs. If you don't want it, you don't want it.
I think my question was more from the other perspective, though. Let's say we bumped up to, like, what was it, 19,000 per student. What could that get to them? Or what benefit could that be to the students? Like, additional programs or
Well, yeah,
teachers, small classes?
Well,
Like, what's that?
all of the, cost of teachers, cost of materials, cost of instruction, all of that is wrapped into per pupil expenditure. And then if you want, you probably shouldn't want that listed today, but I didn't even think about it.
Like, what do those other schools get that our school doesn't get because they have that additional spending?
Well, they have bigger programs, they have more teachers, they're able to expand programming. So if we want to expand, we want to have an internship shadowing. In order to do that, we need more guidance now. So that will theoretically increase per pupil expenditure a little bit. So anytime you expand programming, you expand per pupil expenditure a bit too. So if you just do level service, then you're not doing that. We haven't, if you think about it over the past few years, we put a lot in and we've increased per pupil expenditure. So, yeah, everything's a cost, and all of those costs to increase programming gets reflected in that per pupil expenditure. Teacher salaries go in there, so you hire another teacher, hire another guidance counselor, it gets reflected in there. I don't know by how much, but it'll get reflected in the formula. And we should probably, Bob, at some point, bring that slide. That would be, because I didn't realize there'd be so many questions about it. It has all of the categories that go into the per pupil expenditure from the Department of Ed.
Okay.
And at some point, but, I don't know, does that answer your question?
Can I add?
Yes, yeah.
I just want to say the purpose of the pupil expenditure slide. So you're asking one way, what would you get? I mean, you would specifically get the additional school counselor, the ELA coach for giving direct instruction to, the coach giving instruction to teachers. And you'd get us being able to convert the curriculum assistant, which would get Carol in the schools more. So those are the things that you would get out of the increase. But the other thing that we need to present is, if I'm a town, I don't have any context for assessing whether this is fair or not. Like, why are you asking for all these things? It seems like a lot of money. And by showing them per pupil expenditure, we can remind them that we're relatively wealthy towns. We are a relatively high-performing district, and our per pupil spending is in the, high 30s percentile across the state relative to neighboring communities we want to compete with. We spend less than most of them. So it's a context, and I think that they understand that. It might not be something that they can say, well, we can't fix that right away, but I want to keep that in front of them. And if we're above that, then it's like they could also make the case, then, well, maybe you don't need to invest. We'd probably have a harder time making a case if we were at the top of the state. Probably have a harder time making a case for a $1 million increase.
And those are the two things I would like to see, right? Like, along with the per pupil spending, where do we rank in performance among those towns? However you want to measure performance, it's subjective, but. And then exactly what you just said, the speech and language pathologist, the curriculum assistant, all that stuff. I mean, it's in here, but to me, you didn't gloss over it. What I'm saying, got lost to me among everything else. Those are the things I want to see. If I'm going to spend that much more money, I want that to be front and center and blasting in my face every time you talk about it.
And the other thing, like, and we've talked about it at other times, but even if you talk about personnel, which is reflected heavily in per pupil expenditure, you look at BES, for example. BES is about at 2015 personnel levels, and that's with a number of additions over the last 4 years. I'll make an argument that the middle high school is probably 3 to 4 positions at least short of where they should be. And we know that because we have a number of teachers who teach 6 courses. So the reason that happens is because you don't hire teachers. So as you continue to stretch, at some point you can't do it anymore. And they say, well, and what happens, the argument is always, well, your summative test is still good. You still have good MCAS scores. At some point, that catches up with you. And once you do that, you can't hire 5 teachers in a year. And that's one of the long-term things we really need to start looking at. And by hiring more personnel, and this is why we've made a big focus in this budget and in the district improvement plan coming up, to focus on personnel, because we need to turn that around. And that will, that's the biggest investment we can make in students, is your personnel, people teaching them.
Yeah, that's what I want to see.
Yeah, no question, but again, we're playing, for a number of reasons, we're playing catch up. And when you look at things like the things that happen at the high school, and you look at, we're at 2015 funding, personnel levels at BES, a town that's increasing in the enrollment. We got to start turning that around, and we've done that. COVID is a little kink in it, but that's what you get for your money. The best investment in the kid is teachers, good teachers, no question about it.
I think that's taking a little more of an aggressive stance than what Mike's saying, and wonder why don't we think that point might be now, to go and say, hey, these are the things that we are prioritizing on this list, the ones that are in green, yellow, and that's a fair process. But I want the town to understand what it is they're not getting by not also going to that next level of funding that would have all those white sections be green, right? So by approving this budget, you're saying no to the things that we're not able to do there, and make sure that the town understands this is what you're saying no to, and this is a potential negative impact saying no to those things will have on the education of students in the district.
And that's what we've tried to do, that's why we laid them all out,
Yeah.
you know, in the original one, so that was our intent, so maybe we didn't, you know, we didn't quite get it across what we were trying to do, but the reason we laid them all out there like that originally is we asked everybody on the leadership team, and the principals, what do you need in terms of personnel? We're focused just on personnel. We didn't even go to curriculum materials and things like that. We're gonna make a focus on personnel because that's what we think it gives the students the best bang for their buck. Then, you know, if you look at that, that's what we're talking about, except for like, you know, the usable instrument, it's a small item. That's what we try to do, so maybe we didn't, are you saying we didn't, that?
I'm asking why
doesn't
we,
come
as
across?
not you guys, I'm asking why we might not want, as a district and school committee, to ask for more than what we're asking for here, and let them say no to it. But understand what it is they're saying no to by not funding all of them.
Well, I think, you know, going back to what Bob was saying about, like, you know, they do give us parameters.
Has Boylston given us parameters?
Bob,
They have not this year, they said, they don't think it'll be 2.5% like Berlin, but, typically we've had a problem, let's say a problem, a challenge getting guidance from the town. Last year, we were able to get it from the town. I think, we're meeting with them tomorrow night, hopefully on a Zoom. I think they're trying to schedule it.
well, we tried this year, we tried to go out a little early and say to the town, so give us a framework to work with them. And I agree with Bob, it's difficult to get, you know, it's difficult to sort of get a number like that. So,
I'll be honest, Jeff, kind of what Adam was saying, the point is the presentation, like, I saw this at lunchtime today, I did not realize the white was not actually coming through this budget. And so maybe it is just a presentation issue. I looked at this and I thought, okay, there's a check mark for that school, so that school's getting a classroom teacher, that school's getting kindergarten aides. That's what I thought.
yeah, good point,
I
yeah,
mean,
good
this
point,
is,
I mean, we
it was-
work with it, so we.
I mean, it was misleading to me. You're trying to
We
get
did
a-
ask it.
Well, we had kind of adopted, when we initially had the slide, we just did the check to show where it was, and then we added the colors for tonight.
Yeah, I don't know, it threw me off, I mean, I'm thinking, I don't know what I was thinking, but it wasn't that, but after you explained it,
Yeah.
it was clear, but it's not.
Yeah, I guess if you're looking at it for the first time, I think we were just thinking, okay, this is what we showed in December, and we talked about the district improvement plan and how that was focusing, that these things were their importance, so they're not gonna go away, you're gonna see them again. And like, you might see some of them next year, like, again, the classroom teacher, which is a must, for next year. And some of them maybe 2 years down the road, but, you know, it's a point well taken. Someone was just looking at this first time, might not gather that, so.
The items that aren't being requested that are above service level requests, the things that we're not gonna continue as of right now, putting in the budget, what's the total cost of those things as we look across what's in white there? It looks like we're looking at $200,000 to cover the things that are in white.
The classroom teacher, I mean, I off the top of my head, the classroom teacher with benefits, maybe 80, the kindergarten aides, it's not benefits, maybe that's 40, special ed teacher 80, potentially more if it's somebody who's, you maybe need somebody more experience there. Single sign-on software is some small software item, it's not expensive. BS preschool staffing, again, be a teacher, we might get some revenue, but there's also some logistics involved there for us to organize that and set it up. Like, I don't think we're ready to do that, even if we were able to budget it. Reducing school choice usage, I mean, that would be 100,000 in Boylston, 200,000 in Tohoto, if we were to do that right away. Instrument repairs is small, and I feel like that doesn't need to be in the budget. We have a donation fund. We have actually a little bit of a budget for user repairs. So I mean, there's ways to pay for some of this without using existing funds. Part of it, which is budgeted. The STEM teacher probably would cost more than the other two teachers. That might be with benefits over 100,000.
So we're about $300,000 of level service of above level requests that we're not gonna put forward.
Yeah.
I mean, given that Boylston hasn't given us guidance, I question that, just ask for.
Well, we like the way you think, Alan, that's for sure. I mean, the honest, I think the honest answer here is that, like, we just didn't think they would fly based on what, the guidance we've had in the last 4 or 5 years, and Bob goes back before that, that we thought we'd, have something lean in, and we'd have a backup plan to then introduce those positions, later on. So that's the honest answer to why we did it like that, to say, okay, let's show good faith effort to pare this down a little bit, and, we've never had anybody say, put them all back in.
I would like to add that it might be, there might be a role for the school committee in trying to talk to the towns earlier, like even before we get to the fall, about, okay, we want to do some things and we want to have a little bit more capacity in our budget, or to get a sense from them. I know that Boylston may have another commercial development going in. When the revenue comes online, I don't know, but that might be year to say, okay, if you're going to get another $3 million in commercial revenue, then that's the year we put forward more initiatives. Or just make the case. So we meet with the towns. I think if they hear from a resident and a school committee member, it can help too. We're happy to kind of go to those meetings. Then we've had kind of a committee a little bit in flux for about 2 years. So maybe that's something we could build into next fall.
Do we have the option of the committee tonight to propose adding some of these things back in prior to meeting with the finance committee and see what they say?
Well, the idea tonight was that you were going to vote on this as presented, correct? So now your question is, could you just say that again?
Could we, rather than voting it through as presented, vote it through the addition of some of the above service level requests that we haven't included and bring that forward?
Well, if you have the ability, as I understand it, Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have the ability, as I understand it, to recommend a different budget number, but you don't have the ability to decide how we increase the budget. But maybe you can certainly make your comments and recommendations, but you do approve what the budget number is, and
And understanding that we don't want to get a no at the end of the day when it comes to a town meeting. We have some flexibility to potentially ask for more now and then pull back on that before we get to a town meeting point, and we know that whatever we put forward, there has a finance committee approval when it goes through. Because I think I agree, I understand how important that would be going into a town meeting that the finance committee approves what's there.
After the time, we don't see this again, we're voting. Do we?
No, once you vote on that.
yeah, unless there's changes. I mean, if we go forward with this, or we go forward with whatever number you approve, and
They don't want to do it.
we talk to the towns, and
Right.
we get kind of firm, we certainly will, Jeff will talk about plans or this week, but we have come back before.
Tell me we're at 2015 funding level. in
Personnel,
Personnel.
roughly. I think actually we're a little bit on that still.
For a student population, we're comparable to the student population members in now in school.
I don't know, it's a little bit more.
Yeah, we had more.
We have more. Oh, because we had a little job, that's another story, but we did have a little job.
But to the question of doing through that, we're looking about rounded to $300,000 if we wanted to add back in some of those things and should we?
That was like 600. It was like 600.
No.
Well, it was 200 down in class.
Well, you used school choice, you didn't factor in reducing.
I'm not backing the school choice piece, I wasn't putting that piece in. I was suggesting the teacher, and as you said, we're not empowered to pick specific items, add back in, but if this group were to vote to put forward a larger number, my suggestion, if we did so, would be to reinstate, include the classroom teacher BES, the kindergarten aide for BES, the sped teacher at BES, the single sign-on software, and the music, which both seem to be small items. The preschool teacher seems to be on the table for now, as we consider that. And then the STEM teacher at Tohoto comes to around $300,000 to $400,000 more than what we're looking at right now. And if they know that commercial stuff is coming online in a year or two, they can come back with it and say,
We've never had this one.
I think you should bring it out. Maybe it's been down.
Did you vote to take these masks off tonight or?
I can't.
I heard a vote.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's significant increase.
It's, right now, it looks like we're asking for a,
And we really have to go through, we were planning in March to start doing, to start prioritizing this list as we start developing our district improvement plan. So we started in March and then we have everything done and we need to treat it, put together in June, so we would, in July, excuse me. So we would have to kind of go through and decide what are going to be our priority ones out of that list.
And, I mean, I almost wonder if you can't go to the finance committee and vote in particular, because the contract piece of this too, a lot of those are boiled related items. The option A is funded at this level, you don't get this. So you get all these things, option B is funded at this lower level, and these are the things that come off the table.
Well, I think Bob showed that slide, but we were, we were anticipating actually just them asking us to decrease to get down to even lower, but not that I, not that I have a problem with your thinking.
Can I give you a different side negotiation thing? If the principal submits to me a list of 15 items, like, I'm just gonna say, well, I'm not gonna feel like they've really vetted the list. I feel like if we present pretty much everything, they're not gonna feel like we've kind of vetted our list, and they may look at it and say, okay, well, you haven't done any work on this, we're not gonna move. So I do think that's a risk. I don't know that they're gonna say that, but I think Berlin will be the one that's, my sense is Berlin will be the one that's a little bit.
Or, the way that it's not wrong, we like to do that. A lot of the others are on there.
Right, no, yep.
I think at this point, we've done a lot of work at this. I would suggest that the committee votes to approve this and, maybe we get a school committee involved in, at least some of the initial, work on the district improvement plan. We can get suggestions. And that's what we would normally do with the transitional one. So maybe those are some of the things that you can talk about to us, where you feel the direction of the district, and we'll incorporate those. And, you prioritize your list also, we'll prioritize, and we'll use those to develop our next district improvement plan and our next budget. I think that would be the cleaner way to do it at this point. And again, I'm not knocking your way of thinking, I'm really not. I'm glad you think like that, but I think at this point, we've come this far with it. So I think, I agree the time is now, but I think the time to do it is with the new district improvement, which we'll start working on shortly.
And there's probably an opportunity for all of us and the committee as a whole to think about how we engage with the community in the district improvement plan and how we sell it to the community so that they understand what they're, again, to my point, what are you gonna get if we increase the school budget to meet this thing? What are you gonna get the priorities of this plan? And what we're going to do is accelerate those things. And
Well, see, those are the kind of suggestions that would be, yeah, those are the kind of suggestions, if you want to see that incorporated into the district improvement plan, like that kind of stuff, we can figure out how to do it. You're gonna vote on it, so we're gonna put in there how you think we can sell this too, so.
Yeah, I think it's a better idea. I mean, great idea, like, who's gonna vote down money for kids, right? But I think it just, a 5% increase in either town already, it's hard to swallow, especially with the way, highest inflation since the 80s, right? In my personal budget, I don't know what you got, things are already up more than 5%. My taxes are on top of that, more than 5%. it'd be a tough pill to swallow, I think. But focusing on the plan and working on also the marketing job
Yeah,
would be probably easier.
because that's, I mean, we're starting now, this is February, we usually start March, April, just collecting ideas. So these are ideas that we'd love to hear from you and we'll incorporate them into the plan. So by the time you actually vote on it in September, you'll have something that looks familiar to you, and that'll give us direction for the next 3 years to, increase personnel, to increase programming. But I think tonight, I think the best course of action would be to vote to approve the budget as presented.
Can I just ask a quick question to Ace, just one side? How many kindergarten aides are there at VES right now?
Regular ed?
Okay.
Just regular ed, 0.
You have no kindergarten aides?
We have special ed aides. We had one that was 0.45, but we had to transition her to special ed to take on some special ed.
How many did you
And
have?
is there,
What?
How many special ed?
How many special ed powers going?
What was it at the most did you have?
Like right now? Okay.
No, when some of those cut.
So, when I first started, we had 2 kindergartens and 2 full-time kindergarten aides. Sorry, I wasn't understanding the question.
That was before I was here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it wasn't cut when I was here either.
The classes were, don't quote me on this, but they were like 15, 16.
So similar to what they are now.
Yeah.
okay, can I ask one more question? So you have no kindergarten aides?
No general and kindergarten.
I mean, I think that's significant. If we were speaking to Adam's point, I understand your point too, but the idea is to, have you ever gone to town floor without FinCom recommendation?
No. That's
You don't necessarily have to do that either.
No, I know. So I mean, I think that's significant that he doesn't have the aid. Also, the Tohoto STEM teacher, is there currently one?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, there's several. It's science, technology, and engineering.
Okay.
Again, that's one of those areas, Julie, that really we need to work on, math and science in high school.
Right, that's why I brought that, sure, and then the musical part too. I mean, the ones in white, I agree with that.
To do the question on the kindergarten aides at VES, with the ESSER funds that are going to potentially fund the 4th quoting years, we would be reallocated to something like kindergarten aides if we don't end up needing the 4th nurse line going into next year.
We could, I mean, those funds go away though.
I understand that.
Yeah.
We'd have to look at, maybe we'd have to repurpose a different position to the ESSER, because we have to meet in terms of the grant and shift the money around. But can I also just make a comment about Boylston's budget, because I think we painted a little bit of a picture. It wasn't an awful place. We've added 2 teachers in the last couple of years. We've added, I think, 4 or 5 aides. We've added a full-time technology teacher. So like the budget was in an awful place at Boylston Elementary. We're making progress. The challenges that we're trying to digest as much as we can as we go forward, but we're doing it in pieces. And I think it's worth having a conversation about, at some point, if we have several things to put there, maybe it gets to the point where it's an override. But I do think it's worth, when we have a district improvement plan, bring some of these and saying, we want to push this into one budget year and have it be voted on. And I don't think that's this year. I don't know that we have enough runway, but I do think if we want to be more aggressive, we should present it as a package and say, get it, and not just talk to the parents. I think we're going to get parent support. I can tell you, we're pretty much going to get parent support. We always have, especially from parents of students. I do think we need to talk to the towns earlier, even maybe before the school year, and say, here's the things that we didn't do. We really want to get these on the radar. We know that the increase is going to be more than 6% for Boylston Elementary. More than the town would typically see, but I think it would be helpful to have the school committee there for those conversations too.
It's probably more aggressive with the district improvement plan, yeah. Well, everything, except for some of these things, when we start to rethink the personnel issue, some of those are new, but for the most part, we've stuck with everything in the district improvement, so nothing's been a surprise. So, just thinking about that, maybe being in touch understand what Bob's saying, just being more aggressive with how we use that. So you bring that to the town and say, here's everything right here, so there's no surprises. And we probably did, we used it as an internal document more than an external document. But I think it's the first one we have, so.
So I think that, given the feedback I have tonight, I think that you go forward, Lori, I think that as we think about moving across the district improvement plan and promoting that to the community, especially as a newly chair-owned school committee, I think it would give us an opportunity to share with the community the work that we are doing and the direction we want to see the school district going in, based on the district improvement plan, and indicate there's going to be a cost for that. And part of that cost is to do growth within Florida in particular, but also our desire to right point, provide the right return on the investment that people are getting.
Yeah, I like that plan, it'll be ready in September, October timeframe.
Well, what was it, yeah?
All the Halloween fundraisers we can talk about. Cool.
Are there any other questions? Discussion? Okay, could I have a motion to accept the fiscal year 2023 preliminary budget as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
So we do that.
All in favor?
I'm sorry, whatever, do you mind calling that the open hearing budget instead
Oh,
of the
yep.
budget budget?
So a motion to accept the fiscal 2023 open hearing budget as presented? Adam, so moved.
Second.
Next second? No discussion? All in favor? I'm an aye as well, opposed?
Thank you.
Motion to accept the fiscal year 2023 budget hearing passes. Our next dates for meetings will be, actually will be March 8th. We canceled our March 1st one because we just had that this evening. And then we'll have the 22nd as needed. And just a reminder that we're accepting resumes for the open seat from Berlin. From any residents in Berlin, we ask that you send them to either myself or Christy Turgeon by our March 8th meeting, where we will hopefully be choosing another for a vacant seat. Is that?
Did you receive it yet?
We have not.
Thank you.
I hope we get some.
Oh, okay, so-
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can we get a second? Adam, Mike? Roll call. Adam? Julie?
Aye.
Megan? Aye. Mike?
Aye.
I am an aye as well. This concludes our meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.